The cold November rain slicked the streets of Manhattan, turning the city's evening glow into a watercolor blur. For the man who called himself Arthur, the damp chill that seeped through his threadbare coat was a welcome sensation. It was real. More real than the climate-controlled air of his penthouse, more real than the sycophantic laughter of his board members. For 3 weeks, he had been Arthur, a ghost haunting the lower levels of his own empire. He was Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Grandeur Hotels and Resorts, a global titan of luxury, but tonight he was just an old man with a convincing limp and a 3-week-old beard, nursing a cup of black coffee in the corner of the Gilded Compass, his flagship restaurant. He watched the ballet of service, the practiced smiles, the swift, silent movements of the staff. He saw the subtle hierarchies, the flickers of fear and camaraderie. He was here to see the truth, the rot that might fester beneath the polished veneer. And tonight he found it in the form of the restaurant's floor manager, a man named Richard Thompson. Thompson moved with the predatory grace of a man who enjoyed his small kingdom. His suit was a size too tight, his smile a predatory flash of white. He terrorized the staff with quiet, venomous remarks, a hand on a shoulder that lingered too long, a gaze that stripped them of their dignity. Alexander had been watching him for an hour, his stomach tightening with each casual cruelty. Then he saw her. Her name tag read Clara. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. Yet she moved with a determined grace, her smile genuine even when her eyes were shadowed with worry. She was refilling water at a table of boisterous finance types when one of them, laughing too loudly, gesticulated with a wild swing of his arm. His hand connected with the pitcher, ice-cold water cascaded down the front of a woman in a silk dress who shrieked as if she'd been doused in acid. The table fell silent. Clara stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her hands fluttering uselessly as she grabbed for napkins. Richard Thompson was there in an instant, his face a thundercloud. He didn't address the guests. He didn't try to smooth things over. His focus was a laser beam of fury aimed directly at Clara. "You clumsy, incompetent fool," he hissed, his voice low but carrying in the sudden quiet. "Look what you've done. This dress probably costs more than you make in a month." "It was an accident," Clara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "The gentleman, he—" "Are you blaming the guest?" Thompson's voice rose, a whip crack of sound. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "You are worthless, utterly worthless." He shoved her toward the mess on the floor. "Clean it up. On your knees. Now." Humiliation washed over the young woman's face. The guests at the table shifted uncomfortably, the man who caused the spill suddenly finding the ceiling fascinating. Clara dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she tried to blot the puddle with a linen napkin. A sob escaped her lips, a small, broken sound. Alexander felt a cold, hard rage solidify in his chest. This was it. This was the rot. The sight of her kneeling, crying, seemed to inflame Thompson further. Perhaps it was the audience, or perhaps it was the simple, ugly pleasure of power. He took a step forward. "Crying? You think tears will fix this?" He drew back his polished shoe and delivered a sharp, deliberate kick to her side, aimed at her ribs. It wasn't a brutal, bone-breaking blow, but it was something far worse. It was contemptuous, dismissive. A kick one would give to a stray dog. Clara gasped, curling into herself with a pained whimper. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Alexander Sterling, the man they knew as Arthur, pushed himself to his feet. The manufactured limp was gone. He moved with the slow, deliberate purpose of a man who had not felt such pure, unadulterated fury in decades. Every eye was on the unfolding drama, but soon they would all be on him. Alexander walked towards the scene, the worn-out soles of his shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. The ambient noise of the restaurant had died, replaced by a tense, waiting silence. Thompson, puffed up with his own petty authority, barely registered the old man approaching until Alexander was standing right beside him. "That's enough," Alexander said. His voice was quiet, raspy from disuse, the voice of Arthur the Vagrant, not Alexander the Titan. Thompson turned, his eyes flicking over Alexander's shabby attire with disdain. "And who are you?" "The janitor. Get back to your corner before I have you thrown out." He turned his attention back to Clara, who was still huddled on the floor. "Get up. You're making a scene." "I said," Alexander repeated, his voice dropping an octave, gaining a flinty edge that made Thompson pause. "That is enough." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the manager's face, but it was quickly replaced by arrogance. He saw a frail old man, a nobody. "Listen, old-timer, this is an employee matter. It doesn't concern you. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your seat, or my security will be helping you find the door." Violently, Alexander met his gaze. The pale blue eyes that usually held a weary wisdom now burned with the cold fire of command. "You will not speak to her again. You will not touch her again. You will, in fact, do nothing but stand here and wait." The sheer, unshakable authority in his tone finally gave Thompson pause. It was the kind of voice that expected and received absolute obedience. It didn't belong with the threadbare coat and the scruffy beard. A nervous laugh escaped Thompson's lips. "Wait for what? For you to have a senior moment?" Alexander ignored him. He knelt down, his knees protesting slightly, and extended a hand to Clara. His hand was clean, the nails impeccably manicured, a detail at odds with the rest of his appearance. "Miss, are you all right?" Clara looked up, her face streaked with tears and shame. She flinched away from his hand, expecting another blow. "Please, sir, just go back to your table. You'll only make it worse for me." "It cannot get any worse for you," Alexander said, his voice now gentle, reassuring. "And I promise you, it is about to get much, much better. Please take my hand." Hesitantly, she placed her small, trembling hand in his. He helped her to her feet with surprising strength. He then turned to the stunned table of guests. His eyes fell on the woman in the silk dress. "Madam, my sincere apologies for this disruption. Your entire party's meal is, of course, on the house, as is a private shopping experience at Bergdorf's tomorrow to replace your dress with my compliments. A car will be sent for you. Please give your details to my staff on the way out." He spoke with such casual command that the woman, who had been ready to launch into a tirade, simply nodded, speechless. Thompson stared, his mouth agape. "Your staff? What are you talking about? I'm the manager here. I make those decisions." "You were the manager," Alexander corrected him calmly. He pulled a small, sleek satellite phone from the inside pocket of his coat. It was a stark, modern contrast to his grimy exterior. He pressed a single speed dial button. The rest of the staff had begun to gather at the edges of the room, watching with a mixture of terror and dawning hope. They had all suffered under Richard Thompson. They had all dreamed of a moment like this. The phone was answered on the first ring. "Benjamin," Alexander said, his voice now crisp, clear, and utterly transformed. The rasp of Arthur was gone, replaced by the resonant baritone of Alexander Sterling. "It's me. I need you to listen very carefully. I am at the Gilded Compass in the New York flagship. There is a floor manager here. His name is Richard Thompson." Thompson's face had gone from red with anger to a pasty, sickly white. The name Benjamin seemed to echo in the silent room. Every top executive in the Sterling Grandeur Empire knew that name. Benjamin Carter, head of the most ruthless corporate legal department in the country. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," the voice on the phone replied, audible even from a few feet away. "Benjamin, I want you to mobilize the entire litigation department, all of them. I want you to pull every file we have on Richard Thompson. Employment contract, performance reviews, expense reports, emails, security logs. I want to know if he has ever been late, if he has ever misused a corporate credit card for a coffee, if he has ever taken a pen home from the office. I want you to scrutinize every clause of his contract for grounds for immediate termination with maximum prejudice." Alexander paused, his cold eyes locked on Thompson, who had begun to tremble. "Sir, I can have his termination papers drawn up in 20 minutes, Benjamin said. "No, Benjamin. You misunderstand me," Alexander said, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't just want him fired. I want him erased. I want a team to start making calls to every major hospitality group in North America and Europe. Let them know, through appropriate legal channels of course, that Mr. Thompson has been terminated for gross misconduct, including physical assault of an employee." I want you to prepare a civil suit against him for damages to the Sterling Grandeur brand. I want a restraining order filed to prevent him from setting foot in any of our properties ever again. I want to make it so that the only job he can get in this industry is scrubbing toilets in a back alley dive bar. And even then, I want him to be looking over his shoulder. I want 50 of our best lawyers on this, Benjamin. I want this man's professional life to cease to exist by sunrise. Am I clear? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, then a simple, chilling response. Crystal clear, Mr. Sterling. Consider it done. Alexander disconnected the call. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at Richard Thompson. The manager was staring at him, his face a mask of dawning, abject horror. The shabby old man was gone. In his place stood the architect of his doom. The name clicked in his mind, the face now seeming vaguely familiar from corporate newsletters. Sterling. Alexander Sterling. You're… Thompson stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I am the man who signs your paycheck, Alexander said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Or rather, I was. A team from corporate security and human resources will be here in 15 minutes. I suggest you go to your office and wait for them. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch anything. Your career is over. Your life as you know it is over. Now get out of my sight. Thompson, utterly broken, gave a jerky nod. He looked at Clara, then at Alexander, and without another word, he turned and walked away, his power suit now looking like a cheap costume on a defeated man. The entire restaurant staff, who had been watching in stunned silence, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to applaud. The 15 minutes that followed were a surreal tableau. The hushed, shocked atmosphere of the dining room slowly gave way to a wave of relief and disbelief among the staff. Whispers turned into excited murmurs. The chefs peered out from the kitchen doors, their white hats bobbing. The sommelier, a man who had endured Thompson's condescension for years, discreetly uncorked a bottle of Dom Perignon, not for a guest, but in quiet celebration. Alexander led Clara to a secluded table in the corner, the one he had occupied as Arthur. He pulled out a chair for her, a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed entirely natural. She sat, still trembling, clutching her hands in her lap. She kept looking at him, trying to reconcile the image of the kind, disheveled old man with the titan of industry who had just dismantled a man's life with a single phone call. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. Thank you. But what you did, it was necessary, Alexander finished for her, his voice softening again. Clara, that's your name, isn't it? She nodded. Clara, what happened here tonight was not an isolated incident. I've been watching Mr. Thompson. I've seen the way he treats people. A company like a garden must be tended. Weeds must be pulled from the root, lest they choke out everything that is good. He poured her a glass of water from the carafe on the table, his movements steady and calm. Tell me about yourself, Clara. How long have you worked here? Almost a year, she said, taking a sip of water. The cold liquid helped to calm her racing heart. I need the job. I have a son, Leo. He's 5. A pang of something, empathy, memory, struck Alexander. His own daughter, Eleanor, had been 5 when his wife passed away. He remembered the crushing weight of single parenthood, even with all the resources in the world at his disposal. What must it be like for this young woman, working grueling hours for minimum wage, enduring the abuse of men like Thompson? A single mother, he said, more to himself than to her. That is the hardest job in the world. It's not so bad, she said, a flicker of pride in her tired eyes. He's my whole world. I'm also taking night classes online. Business administration. I want to give him a better life. I want to be someone he can be proud of. The words struck another chord with Alexander. His own father, the founder of Sterling Grandeur, had started as a bellhop, with nothing but ambition and a fierce sense of dignity. He had built this empire on a simple principle: treat your staff like family, and they will treat your guests like royalty, a principle Richard Thompson had trampled into the mud. Just then, the front doors of the restaurant opened with a quiet whoosh. 3 figures entered, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from relief to sober reality. A tall, imposing man in a dark suit led the way, the head of corporate security. Flanking him were a sharp-featured woman from HR and a younger man in a crisp suit, undoubtedly a junior lawyer from Benjamin Carter's team, holding a briefcase. They moved with a silent, devastating efficiency. They didn't even glance at the dining room, their eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the manager's office. The execution squad had arrived. Clara watched them go, a shiver running down her spine. "Is all of that really going to happen to him?" she asked, a note of unease in her voice. "What you said on the phone?" "Every last word of it," Alexander confirmed, his expression unreadable. Men like Thompson don't learn from a simple firing. They see it as a setback, a piece of bad luck. They move on to another company and abuse another group of people. The only way to stop the poison from spreading is to neutralize it completely. He saw the conflict in her eyes. She was a person of inherent kindness, and even after the humiliation and pain he had caused her, the idea of such total annihilation was unsettling. "Do not waste your sympathy on him, Clara," Alexander advised gently. He had a choice. Every day he came to work, he chose to be cruel. He chose to wield his power like a weapon against those who had none. Today, he discovered what it feels like when a real weapon is aimed back at him. He leaned forward slightly. "But this isn't about him anymore. It's about you. And it's about what this company is supposed to stand for." He paused, a thought beginning to form in his mind, a plan far grander than simply punishing one corrupt manager. "Your night classes, business administration. What is your goal?" She looked surprised by the question. I don't know. A supervisor position, maybe? An office job. Something with regular hours, so I can be there to put Leo to bed." "Think bigger," Alexander urged. "My father used to say, don't build a career, build a legacy. What is the legacy you want to build for your son?" Clara was quiet for a long moment, staring into her glass of water. No one had ever asked her a question like that. Her life was a series of small, desperate goals. Make rent, buy groceries, fix the car, pass the next exam. The idea of a legacy seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford to even dream of. Finally, she looked up, and for the first time that night, the exhaustion in her eyes was replaced by a spark. "I want to build a place where people like me are treated with respect. Where hard work is rewarded, not punished. Where no one has to be on their knees, crying on the floor because of a powerful man's bad day." Alexander Sterling smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, erasing the last vestiges of the cold CEO. In her simple, heartfelt answer, he had not only found a worthy employee, he had rediscovered the soul of his own company. "An excellent legacy," he said, "and I think Sterling Grandeur is the perfect place to build it. Your shift is over, Clara. Go home to your son. Someone from my office will call you in the morning. We have a great deal to discuss about your future." The following morning, Alexander Sterling was back in his natural habitat. The penthouse office atop Sterling Tower was a world of quiet power, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a godlike view of the city below. The shabby coat of Arthur was gone, replaced by a bespoke Savile Row suit that fit him like a second skin. He was clean-shaven, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He was every inch the billionaire CEO. Benjamin Carter sat opposite him, a slim leather portfolio resting on his lap. Carter was in his early 40s, with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass and a loyalty to the Sterling family that was absolute. "The Thompson matter is concluded, Mr. Sterling," Benjamin began, his tone crisp and efficient. "He was terminated for cause at 10:47 p.m. last night. The security team escorted him off the premises. His corporate accounts were frozen, and a digital forensics team is currently imaging his office computer and company phone." "And the erasure?" Alexander asked, steepling his fingers as he looked out at the sprawling metropolis. "Underway," Benjamin confirmed. "Our initial audit of his expense reports from the last 6 months has already flagged over $17,000 in fraudulent claims. Dining, travel, client gifts that were never delivered. It's sloppy. Arrogant. He thought no one was watching." "People like him always do," Alexander murmured. "We have enough for a criminal referral, should you choose to pursue it," Benjamin continued. "As for his future prospects, I've had discreet conversations with my counterparts at the Hyatt, Marriott, and Four Seasons groups this morning. A general advisory about a senior manager terminated for financial misconduct and workplace safety violations has been circulated. His resume is now effectively radioactive. Alexander nodded slowly. The machine of his corporation had worked its terrible, efficient magic. Richard Thompson was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost, a cautionary tale. Good. What else? There is one complication, Benjamin said, opening his portfolio. Richard Thompson is the nephew of one of our board members, Mr. Gerald Vance. Alexander turned from the window, his expression unconcerned. Vance, head of the acquisitions committee, a pompous fool who inherited his seat. The same, Benjamin confirmed. Vance called me at 6 this morning, screaming like a banshee. He demanded to know why his talented nephew was treated so disgracefully. He threatened to bring it up at the next board meeting, to call for a review of your leadership. A faint, humorless smile touched Alexander's lips. Let him. I've been wanting to trim the dead wood from that board for years. This might be the perfect opportunity. He waved a dismissive hand. Vance is a nuisance, not a threat. Deal with him. Send him the file on his nephew's embezzlement. Suggest quietly that if he values his own position, he will drop the matter entirely. Consider it done, Benjamin said, making a note. Now, on to the more important matter. The young woman, Clara Rossi. Yes. Clara, Alexander said, his tone softening. What have we learned about her? She's exactly as she appears, Benjamin reported. Single mother to Leo Rossi, age 5. No father listed on the birth certificate. She works 2 jobs, the Gilded Compass at night, and a diner in Queens in the morning. She is, as she told you, enrolled in an online business administration program with the City College. Her grades are exemplary. She has no criminal record, no history of disciplinary action at any previous job. By all accounts, she is a model employee and citizen who has had a string of bad luck. Benjamin paused, then slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany desk. But there is one other thing, something I think you'll find interesting. We ran a standard background check, which includes family employment history with the company. Her father was a man named Marco Rossi. Alexander picked up the paper. The name was instantly familiar, a memory from a lifetime ago. Marco Rossi, the head concierge at the original New York hotel, my father's right-hand man. The very same, Benjamin confirmed. He worked for your father for 30 years. He retired in 2005. According to the file, he was forced into early retirement by the management team that took over after your father's passing, just before you assumed the CEO position. Alexander stared at the paper, the pieces clicking into place. He remembered Marco, a kind, dignified man who knew the name of every regular guest and could procure anything from last-minute opera tickets to a rare vintage of wine with a single phone call. He was the heart and soul of the hotel's service. The interim CEO, a ruthless cost-cutter named Peterson, whom Alexander had fired on his first day, had purged many of his father's loyalists. Marco, it seemed, had been one of them. They forced him out, Alexander said, his voice laced with a newfound anger. They pushed aside a man with 30 years of loyal service to save a few dollars on his pension. It appears so, Benjamin said. Marco Rossi passed away 2 years ago. It seems his daughter, Clara, was left to fend for herself. The rage Alexander had felt the night before returned, but this time it was deeper, more personal. The rot in his company ran deeper than one abusive manager. It was in the very history of the place, a betrayal of his father's legacy. His quest to find the truth of his company had led him right back to his own family's past. He looked at Benjamin, his eyes clear and resolved. I want you to draw up a new employment contract for Ms. Rossi. Of course, a promotion? Manager of the Gilded Compass? No, Alexander said, standing up and walking back to the window. Much more than that. I am creating a new position, Director of Employee Experience and Welfare, reporting directly to me. Her first task will be to conduct a full, top-to-bottom review of every hotel in our portfolio. She will have the authority to interview any employee, review any manager, and recommend any changes she deems necessary to ensure our people are treated with the dignity they deserve. Benjamin's eyebrows shot up. This was an unprecedented move. Mr. Sterling, that is an immense amount of power to give to someone with her level of experience. She has more experience in what truly matters than any of your Ivy League MBAs, Alexander countered. She has lived it. She has been on her knees on the floor of my restaurant. Her perspective is more valuable to me right now than 100 corporate consultants. He continued, his voice ringing with conviction. Her salary will be commensurate with a senior executive position. We will provide a full scholarship to complete her degree at any university she chooses. We will also arrange for a corporate apartment for her and her son, closer to the city, and enroll him in the best private school we can find. And one more thing, Benjamin. Sir, find out the exact amount of money Marco Rossi was cheated out of in his pension by Peterson's board. Calculate it with interest and add a significant multiplier for pain and suffering. Deposit that sum into a trust fund for his grandson, Leo Rossi. We have a debt to repay. Benjamin Carter, a man not easily impressed, simply nodded, a flicker of profound respect in his eyes. I will handle it personally, Mr. Sterling. As Benjamin left the office, Alexander remained at the window, looking down at the city. It was no longer just a collection of buildings and streets. It was a city full of Claras and Leos, of people fighting quiet battles every day. He had set out to find a problem in his company. Instead, he had found a purpose. Clara Rossi's world had tilted on its axis. One moment she was scrubbing spilled water off a floor. The next she was sitting in a town car so luxurious it felt like a spaceship on her way to Sterling Tower. She had spent the night in a daze, half convinced the entire episode was a stress-induced dream. But the morning phone call from a woman with a voice like polished steel who introduced herself as Mr. Sterling's executive assistant had made it terrifyingly real. She was escorted to the top floor, her worn-out sneakers silent on a carpet thicker than any she had ever walked on. The office was larger than her entire apartment, and there, standing by the window, was the man from the restaurant. Not Arthur, the shabby old man, but Alexander Sterling, the powerful CEO. He turned and smiled, and for a moment she saw the kind eyes of Arthur again. Clara, please come in, sit down, he said, gesturing to a plush leather chair. She sat on the edge, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Mr. Sterling, I still can't believe this is happening. Please, call me Alexander, he said, sitting opposite her. We have a lot to talk about, and I want to start by apologizing. Not for what I did to Mr. Thompson, he deserved that and more, but for the fact that a man like him was ever allowed to hold a position of authority in my company. The failure is mine, and I intend to rectify it. He then laid out his offer, the new position, the title, Director of Employee Experience and Welfare, the authority, the salary, a number so large Clara felt dizzy just hearing it, the scholarship, the apartment, the school for Leo. With each new detail, her eyes grew wider. It was too much. It was a fairy tale. But why? She finally managed to ask, her voice a whisper. I'm just a waitress. I don't have the experience for something like this. You have the only experience that matters, he replied firmly, and this isn't just about what happened last night. This is about your father. He slid the file on Marco Rossi across the desk. Clara stared at the name, then at the photograph clipped to the page, a younger, happier version of the father she remembered, standing proudly in his concierge uniform. Tears pricked her eyes. You knew my father? I did, Alexander said gently. He was a great man, a loyal man. He was the heart of this hotel for 30 years. And this company, in a time before I was in charge, failed him. We cast him aside. What I am offering you is not charity, Clara. It is a restoration. It is a chance to right a wrong that was done to your family, and to ensure that no other family suffers the same indignity. He told her about the trust fund for Leo, an apology in the form of a secure future. Clara finally broke down, the tears she had held back flowing freely. But these were not tears of humiliation and pain. They were tears of overwhelming cathartic relief. The weight she had been carrying on her shoulders for years, the struggle to survive, to provide for her son, to honor her father's memory, it was all lifting. I accept, she said, her voice thick with emotion but steady with a newfound resolve. I will not let you down, Alexander. I know you won't, he said, a genuine warmth in his smile. The board meeting was held in a room that smelled of old money and polished wood. Gerald Vance sat near the head of the table, his face a mask of smug fury. He believed he had Alexander cornered. He had spent the morning calling other board members, spinning a tale of Alexander's supposed dementia, his public outburst, his reckless promotion of an unqualified waitress. "Before we begin," Alexander said, his voice calm as he took his seat, "Mr. Vance has indicated he has a pressing matter to discuss." "I do," Vance boomed, rising to his feet. His jowls quivered with indignation. "I am here to demand a review of our CEO's fitness to lead. Last night, Alexander Sterling, in what can only be described as a senile fit, publicly humiliated and fired my nephew, a manager with an impeccable record, over a trivial accident. He then promoted the clumsy waitress responsible to a senior executive position. This is madness. It is a betrayal of our shareholders and a threat to the stability of this company." He looked around the table, seeking allies. A few of the older members, those who also owed their seats to nepotism rather than merit, nodded in agreement. "Are you quite finished, Gerald?" Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am not," Vance spat. "I am proposing an immediate vote of no confidence. This company needs a leader, not an old man playing make-believe with the help." The word help hung in the air, thick with disdain. Alexander simply nodded slowly. "Thank you, Gerald. Your position is noted." He then glanced toward the door. "Benjamin, you may proceed." The doors opened and Benjamin Carter entered, followed by two junior lawyers wheeling a large monitor. The room fell silent. Benjamin's presence in a board meeting was always a sign that something serious was about to happen. "Good morning, members of the board," Benjamin said, his voice as sharp as a razor. "Mr. Vance has raised concerns about the termination of his nephew, Richard Thompson. We have prepared a brief presentation to clarify the matter." On the screen, Richard Thompson's corporate headshot appeared. Next to it, a column of figures began to populate the screen. "This is Mr. Thompson's expense report for the last fiscal year," Benjamin explained. "As you can see, he claimed over $50,000 for client entertainment. However, when cross-referenced with security logs and restaurant reservation systems, we found that over 80% of these clients were, in fact, Mr. Thompson himself, dining alone or with personal friends." A murmur went through the room. Vance's face began to lose its ruddy color. "Furthermore," Benjamin continued, clicking to the next slide, which showed stills from security footage, "Mr. Thompson's impeccable record includes no fewer than 14 formal complaints of harassment filed with HR over the past 2 years, all of which were mysteriously resolved and buried by a sympathetic executive." He paused, letting his gaze drift to Vance. "And finally, there is the matter of assault. The company has a zero-tolerance policy." The final image on the screen was a crystal-clear still from the restaurant's security camera, showing Thompson's shoe connecting with Clara's side as she knelt on the floor. The image was brutal, undeniable. Gasps echoed around the table. "My God," one of the board members whispered. Vance was white as a sheet, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. This is a fabrication, a setup." "Is it, Gerald?" Alexander's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Was it also a setup when you used your position on the acquisitions committee to leak our bidding strategy for the Mandarin Oriental Group to a competitor 2 years ago? We have the phone records." Benjamin clicked again. A transcript of a phone call appeared on the screen, detailing Vance's treachery. The silence in the room was now absolute, broken only by Vance's ragged breathing. "For the past 6 months," Alexander explained to the stunned board, "Benjamin and I have been conducting a quiet internal investigation into a network of corruption and nepotism that has been poisoning this company from the inside. A network that protected men like Thompson and profited men like Vance. My time as Arthur was not a senile fit. It was the final step. I needed to see the rot with my own eyes, to witness an act so indefensible that no one could claim it was a misunderstanding. You, Gerald, and your pathetic nephew provided that for me. For that, I thank you." He stood up, his full height seeming to dominate the room. "The motion on the table is not for my removal, it is for yours. A team from the district attorney's office is waiting in the lobby. You can resign now and face our civil suit, or you can refuse and face criminal charges for corporate espionage and conspiracy to defraud. The choice is yours." Vance stared at Alexander, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and abject terror. He was utterly, completely destroyed. He collapsed into his chair, a broken man. Without a word, he signed the resignation papers Benjamin placed before him and was escorted from the room not as a board member, but as a pariah. After the doors closed behind the disgraced Vance, a profound, tomb-like silence settled over the boardroom. The remaining members, men and women accustomed to power and control, looked like chastened schoolchildren. They stared at the damning evidence still glowing on the monitor, then at Alexander, who remained standing at the head of the table, his authority now absolute and terrifying. "Let me be clear," Alexander said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. "The era of looking the other way is over. The culture of rewarding connections over competence ends today. This company was built on the foundation of dignity. Dignity for our guests and dignity for our people. We have strayed from that path. I have strayed from that path." He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze unflinching. "Some of you knew about Vance. Some of you suspected. All of you were content to let the rot fester as long as the stock price remained high. That is an abdication of your duty, and it will not be tolerated again." He gestured to the door, which opened to admit Clara. She wore a simple professional dress, borrowed that morning. She walked in with a quiet poise that belied the tremor in her hands, her eyes fixed on Alexander. The board members stared, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disdain. "This is Clara Rossi," Alexander announced. "As of this morning, she is the Director of Employee Experience and Welfare for Sterling Grandeur worldwide. She will be leading a new initiative, the Marco Rossi Legacy Program, named for her father, a man who gave 30 years of his life to this company only to be discarded. Her department will have my full authority and an unlimited budget. She will answer to no one but me, and her findings will determine the future careers of every manager in this organization. I suggest you all learn her name." The shock was palpable. A vice president of operations, a man named Cutler, known for his ruthless efficiency, scoffed audibly. "With all due respect, Alexander, she's a waitress. What could she possibly know about corporate governance?" Clara, who had been standing silently, turned her head to look at Cutler. She didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Mr. Cutler," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I know what it feels like when a manager's shoe is pressed against your ribs. I know the smell of fear in a staff locker room. I know the calculations a single mother makes between buying medicine for her son and fixing the brakes on her car. These are data points you will not find on a spreadsheet, and they are, I assure you, critical to the health of this company." The room fell silent once more. Cutler's face flushed a deep crimson. Alexander allowed a small, proud smile to touch his lips. He had found more than an employee. He had found an heir to his father's philosophy. In the months that followed, Clara became a quiet storm moving through the Sterling Grandeur empire. She didn't operate from a corner office. Instead, she traveled. She wore the uniforms of the staff. She worked shifts with the housekeeping crews in London, served drinks with the bartenders in Dubai, and bussed tables in the cafes of the Paris flagship. She listened. She learned the names of their children, the aches in their backs, the dreams they held in their hearts. Her greatest test came at the Sterling Grandeur Chicago, a gleaming tower of glass and steel managed by a rising star named Marcus Henderson, a man lauded for his profit margins and feared for his temper. Clara arrived unannounced, taking a room under an assumed name and spending 2 days observing. She saw the impeccable service, but she also saw the terror behind the smiles. She saw Henderson prowling the floors like a wolf, his voice a constant, condescending hiss. The breaking point came in the soaring marble lobby. A young bellhop, barely 20, was struggling with a mountain of designer luggage. One of the bags slipped from his grasp, landing softly on the plush carpet. It didn't break. It didn't even scuff. But Henderson was on him in an instant. "Are you an idiot?" Henderson snarled, his voice low but venomous enough to make nearby guests flinch. "This is Louis Vuitton, you clumsy moron. Do you have rocks in your head? This bag is worth more than your entire worthless life." Clara felt a cold flash of déjà vu. She watched the young man's face crumble, his eyes filling with tears of shame as he stammered apologies. That evening, she called Henderson to a meeting in one of the hotel's smaller conference rooms. He swaggered in, annoyed at the summons from a corporate welfare director he'd never heard of. He entered to find not just Clara, but the young bellhop from the lobby and the hotel's head of housekeeping, a woman who had worked there for 25 years. "Mr. Henderson," Clara began, her voice even and calm, "this is Samuel. You publicly humiliated him this morning. This is Maria. You threatened her job last week because one of her staff was 2 minutes late returning from a break to care for her sick child. I was a waitress once. I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of a manager's bad day. But what I have witnessed here is not a bad day. It is a pattern of abuse." "Now hold on," Henderson blustered, his face reddening. "My results speak for themselves. This hotel is the most profitable in the entire Midwest region." "Indeed," Clara said, pushing a file across the table. "I've also been reviewing your results. Your employee turnover rate is 40% higher than the company average. Your departmental spending on replacing broken equipment and dealing with accidents is astronomical. It seems that when people are terrified, they become careless. Your profits are a mirage built on a foundation of fear and misery. And that is a debt that always comes due." She leaned forward, her eyes as hard as diamonds. "Under the old way of doing things, you would be fired. But Alexander Sterling and I believe in restoration, not just retribution. So here is what will happen. For the next 2 weeks, you will be reporting to Maria. You will be assigned to her housekeeping staff. You will clean rooms, scrub toilets, and change linens. After that, you will spend 2 weeks reporting to Samuel. You will wear a bellhop's uniform, carry luggage, and park cars. You will learn their jobs. You will learn their names. And you will learn what it means to lead with respect. If, at the end of that month, they tell me you have not learned, your career with this company is over. Am I clear?" Henderson stared at her, his jaw slack with disbelief. He looked at Maria, whose tired face held a flicker of grim satisfaction. He looked at Samuel, who stood a little taller than he had that morning. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The wolf had been caged. A year after that fateful night at the Gilded Compass, Alexander stood on the observation deck of Sterling Tower. The city glittered below, a tapestry of 1,000,000 lights. Clara joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. She moved with an easy confidence now, the exhaustion in her eyes replaced by a sharp, intelligent light. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, the wind whipping a strand of her hair across her face. "I see it differently now," Alexander confessed. "I used to see it as a kingdom to be ruled. Now, thanks to you, I see it as a garden to be tended." He took a sip of coffee. "My father kept journals. I've been reading them lately. He wrote about your father, Marco, all the time. He called him his brother-in-arms, the true soul of the company." He pulled a small, leather-bound book from his coat pocket, its pages worn with age. In his last entry, he wrote about his greatest regret. He had planned to nominate Marco to the board of directors. He believed a company that served people should be led by people who understood service. But he got sick before he could make it happen. He handed the journal to Clara. Her eyes scanned the familiar, elegant script of Alexander Sterling Sr. Her breath hitched as she read the passage, her father's name linked with words like integrity, dignity, and future. "That seat on the board," Alexander said, his voice soft but firm, "has been empty for too long. It was meant for a Rossi. The board meeting is tomorrow. I am formally nominating you, Clara Rossi, to fill it. It's time to fulfill my father's promise. It's time to bring the soul of this company into the boardroom where it belongs." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but she did not let them fall. She looked from the journal in her trembling hands to the old man beside her, and then out at the vast, sprawling city that had once seemed so impossibly large and intimidating. A slow smile spread across her face, a smile of profound gratitude and unshakable strength. It was the smile of a woman who had been kicked to the ground, only to rise and touch the sky. She straightened her shoulders, the gesture small but definitive. "Well," she said, her voice clear and steady against the wind, her eyes sparkling with the fire of her father's legacy and her own hard-won future. I suppose I should start preparing my notes.